So, hello everybody, welcome to this Facebook Live where I'm talking about the topic, how can I keep my head when I am in a dip? This question comes up a lot in my group when I'm working with clients. How do I keep my head when I'm in a dip? It is challenging to deal with a dip when you've been feeling better particularly and making progress. And it's easy to get stuck in the fear. People say to themselves, will I come out of this? Will I get better? Am I ever going to get better? How do I deal with the stress and anxiety? If you are watching, just let me know you can see me and hear me. And just checking all the settings. So let's explore this. The first thing I think is really important to share. Actually, let me tell you that I have made a number of videos on the topic of dealing with anxiety and also dealing with dips. So if you are watching on Facebook, go to my page and do a search for anxiety and do a search for dealing with dips, crashes, etc. and you'll find a number of videos. If you're watching on YouTube, go to my channel MECFS Explored, click on the playlists, and there are two playlists. Number 3 is anxiety, number 4 dealing with a dip. So I've got a number of videos there. So there are a number of topics that I've covered already, so I'm not going to cover them today. There's a few kind of core principles I want to talk about briefly in this live training. Okay, so the first thing I think is really important is to understand some key principles. So the first key principle I want you to consider is that there are 3 types of stress. There's acute physical stress. That's, for example, being in a dip after feeling well for a while. There's chronic physical stress. So this is when your body is dealing with a health challenge, for example. And then there's psychological and social stress. So it's really crucial to understand that when we're in a dip, the symptoms or the sensations we are experiencing are the body's attempts to heal. So it's a sign that the body is doing repair work. So, for example, someone with a chronic condition or an ongoing condition, I should say, like MECFS, fibromyalgia, long COVID, POTS, you're experiencing chronic physical stress. If you have a dip after feeling well for a bit, then you're going to experience some acute physical stress. Okay, as I say, when we're in the dip, the sensations that we're experiencing are the body's attempts to heal. And it's a sign the body's doing repair work. Okay, and notice I use the word sensations rather than symptoms because I think the word sensations is just less emotive. Now, if we are experiencing sensations and we add to that psychological stress, then that's going to have an effect. It's going to impact how quickly we heal. If we go to the iPad for a sec, if you imagine that you've got a certain amount of energy, okay, and let's say when you're in a dip, it's the amount of energy you've got is quite small. Okay, that should be a square, but a rectangle, but we'll leave it. Now, if your body's experiencing some acute stress, okay, it's already experiencing some chronic stress because we've got an ongoing condition, okay, chronic, and then on top of that we layer some psychological stress, then as you can see now we're kind of adding more stress to the situation, and therefore the more we can kind of deal with the psychological stress and calm our physiology, then the more we're going to help our body to heal. So if we're resisting what's happening, then that's going to result in the healing going more slowly. If we are more accepting that we're in a dip, and I'll talk about that in a bit more in a minute, then it's going to support healing. Okay. Now, there are many times when I was in a dip, and because I was feeling not great, I was feeling sensations, physical sensations. I was also experiencing emotions, some upset, disappointment, frustration. And then what would happen is, instead of kind of just allowing those physical sensations, allowing those emotions, I'd go to my head and I'd create thoughts such as, oh, am I ever going to get better? I'm not going to get better. And here's the thing, when we ask a question, am I going to get better? Then we tend to answer that in our head. Okay? So, if I'm saying to myself, am I going to get better? At some level, I might be saying, oh, I don't think I am going to get better. And then, that's going to result in more anxiety. If we look at this, the sensation results in thoughts, beliefs, that results in feelings of, for instance, of anxiety, more disappointment, and that might affect our behaviour, how we handle the challenge. So, for instance, one of my strategies of when I felt upset is to get into distracting activities. And actually, what I needed to do was to rest. Okay, so the first thing I want you to think about is that concept of just really having a deep understanding of what's going on. When we're experiencing the symptoms or sensations, our body is doing important healing work. And if we understand that and learn to not be in reaction to the sensations, and just say, okay, this is part of the healing process, then that's going to help calm our physiology. Okay, so that's the first key thing I want to kind of talk about. Second thing is window of tolerance. So it's interesting, if we go back to this map here, I call it the emo map, we each have a different tolerance level of sensation. Okay, some people have quite a big window of tolerance of physical sensations and emotions, and kind of simple example of that is, I remember when I worked at a summer camp in America, myself and the camp director's son were doing a song as part of a review for the kids at the beginning of the summer, and we were doing a song from Sugar, which is the musical version of Some Like It Hot. And I wasn't very used to doing performance, whereas Tony, the guy I was doing with, had done it loads of times. And actually, if you know the film Some Like It Hot, the two main characters, Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis, dress up as women. So that's what we had to do. I was wearing a lovely lime green and polka dots two-piece, and wearing maybe shoes with a slight heel, and we had to do a dance number. And I was really nervous, and I was chatting to Tony saying, are you nervous? And he said, yeah, I am nervous, but it's not a problem. I just understand that that's part of the deal. We're about to perform. There's going to be a bit of nerves, but that's okay. Whereas I was saying, oh, this is bad, I'm feeling nervous, okay? And I was escalating those feelings, all right? So similarly, people have different relationship to sensation. Some people, I was listening to a podcast where two chaps who do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu were talking about training themselves to get used to discomfort. Okay, and that's what you have to do if you're doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, because you spend a lot of time rolling around on the floor trying to get your partner to submit, and they're trying to get you to submit. And they one of the maneuvers is you do a choke, and the person has to tap the floor to say, okay, you've got me. And sometimes people refuse to tap out, as they call it, and they end up kind of blanking out because they're in a choke and they, really need to stop the choke. All right. So, and I was also reading an article written by someone I know, French guy. He was working in London, and when there was terrorist attacks in France, he decided to quit his job. He was so upset and disturbed by that, and joined the French Marines. And in this article, he was talking about having to get used to discomfort and training yourself to have a greater window of tolerance to that discomfort. Okay, and I'm sharing that not as a kind of finger wagging exercise, but I think it's just an important thing to consider, that you do have the capacity to develop your resilience, to develop your window of tolerance. And I know that people who work with people who are experiencing pain and discomfort, this is one of the things they talk about. Okay, so how do we do that? How do we train ourselves to be okay with the discomfort? Okay, so I have talked about this in some of my previous videos in recent months. So if you look back at the videos either on Facebook or on YouTube, check out some of the videos where I've talked a bit about dealing with anxiety, and I've talked about kind of working with the body, working with emotions. One of the things we can do is practice somatic. So this is strategies for connecting to the body, and I'll talk in a minute at the end of this call, this session, about a training I'm going to be doing in a couple of weeks, where I'm going to go into that in a bit more depth and how you can access that training. But it's about learning to feel safe in our body, learning to feel safe even though we're experiencing sensations, learning to tolerate those sensations. And then when we do that, we can actually start working with our emotions. And I've created a PDF, okay, on this topic of working with emotions. Oops. If you'd like that PDF, comment PDF in the chat and I will get that to you in the next day or so. All right. So it's a PDF I've just created for my clients, but I'm going to share it with anyone who wants it. Okay, so that's the second kind of strategy, is exploring how we can build our window of tolerance. Okay, the third thing that I think is important is, and this is something I talked about recently, was it last week or no, the week before, is developing your supervision. Okay, so you have the capacity to become conscious, to become more aware of patterns that you are running. So for example, a very typical pattern is that someone is feeling good. Okay, they're feeling good, and when they're feeling good, emotionally they're feeling okay, happy, etc. But when they're feeling bad, they stress about that. Okay, and at some point again they feel good again. All right, and they feel good. They're physically, their health is better, their energy is better, and they're again more relaxed. They're enjoying it, and sometimes actually people are feeling better, but they are stressing about it. They're saying, oh, how long will this last? But let's imagine someone is feeling good or whatever. And then that pattern repeats itself. They overdo it, perhaps. They go into a dip and they forget that they are going to come out of it. Okay? And so what's happening is that we're actually moving between fear and trust. And I know for some people, they say, well, actually, I spend a lot of time in fear. It's like that's their operating system. And therefore, we need to look at how to make that shift to more trust. That's a big topic, but one of the strategies for doing that is working with your mind. Okay, if we go back to this map here, we need to start looking at what is our mind doing when we are in a dip. Okay, what thoughts are your mind creating? Okay, so if someone is saying, will I come out of this? As I said earlier, when we ask questions, we tend to answer it at some level. So at some level saying, oh no, I don't think I am going to come out of it. And then we get more feelings of anxiety. All right. And one of the things that it's really important to understand is that if we are experiencing sensations, okay, and then we have thoughts that are alarming, okay, that's going to result in feelings of, let's say, anxiety. That's going to result in more sensations. And we know if we have more sensations, we're going to have more unhelpful thoughts. So there's a pattern here, a spiral that's taking us downward. So we need to interrupt that, okay? And we do that by shifting our thinking, all right? So to consider, well, actually, how can I look at this in a different way? Okay, so this is about reframing, okay? So part of supervision is becoming aware of the pattern and looking at how we can reframe the situation. We might say to ourselves, well, actually, what I notice is I seem to go through this pattern of feeling good, then when I'm feeling bad, I get stressed and worry myself and generate lots of unhelpful thoughts. But actually, I do come out of it. Maybe actually, if I just calm my physiology, reassure myself, look, I've come out of this before, okay? And actually what's going to support me coming out of this more quickly is just to calm my physiology, to reassure myself. So actually what we're doing is, if you imagine that part of you that's operating from fear, some people actually think of it as their inner child. They soothe their inner child. They step into their wise self, and there's kind of techniques for doing that, which I teach. And when we're operating from that part of you that has the capacity for wisdom, that part of you can take care of that self that is a little bit scared. And ultimately, the work we can do is, if we think of that as the kind of wise self, instead of switching between the part of us that operates from trust and the part of us that operates from fear. And for some people, as I say, they recognize, and this was me at one point, is that I was really good at operating from fear. And actually, this part of me seemed to shrink, okay, and wasn't very prominent, and this part of me was actually taking over, okay? And what we want to do is actually to reverse that, okay? Is to actually, the more we practice connecting to that part of ourselves that has the capacity for wisdom, then what can happen is this part of us can actually become smaller, and this part of us can actually become bigger and actually take care of the part of us that gets scared. All right. So, for example, sometimes I still have thoughts that aren't very helpful, but whereas in the past they would have kind of taken over and I'd been dwelling on them, I've got greater capacity to step back into the wiser part of me and take care of that part of me that's a bit scared. Okay. So if you've got any comments about that, any questions, let me know. Dana says, PDF, thank you. So if you've got any comments, questions on that, and let me just ask you, to what extent do you relate to that? This idea that kind of there's this oscillation between fear and trust, or maybe you feel like you spend more time in fear than trust, but understand, oh actually sorry, I'm not sharing my iPad at the moment, understand that it is possible to make that shift. So instead of having the operating system fear, it's like a computer, you're running that fear operating system, you can learn to reduce that program, use it less, and start running this operating system trust. So if you've got any comments, questions, let me know. If you're watching the replay, let me know you're watching the replay. If you'd like this PDF, Working with Emotions, pop PDF in the chat and I will send it to you. Feel free to send me a message. So next week I'm going to be doing a free training where I talk about the 9 areas that I think are really important if we want to make those shifts. In that session, I'll be talking about how you can access the training for part 1. So there's 9 steps there. The first step is getting clarity, and I'll be talking about how you can access that training. I'm working with a coach. My coach says I should be charging £297 for this training, part 1. You're going to find out how you can just pay by donation, whatever you can afford. So that's training I'm going to be doing next week at 4:30 p.m. next Thursday. If you'd like the link to that training, I might do it on Zoom. Put the word training in the chat and I will send you the link when it's ready. Okay, and I'll give you an overview of those 9 steps where we talk about stage 1, which is the foundation, stage 2, which is the fundamentals, and stage 3, which is fulfillment. So I'll be talking about those 9 areas, giving you an overview, and I'll tell you how you can access the training, which is going to be live training over a few days. So there'll be opportunities for interaction and you can just pay by donation. Anyway, do get in touch if you've got any questions. Keep up the great work. Let me know if you want the PDF. Let me know if you want the link to the training next week. And thanks for watching. Wishing you great health. Bye for now.